The year I promised to leave the country with Shinhuijing, I instead abandoned him at the airport and ran away. When we met again, someone asked about our relationship. Shinhuijing glanced at me coldly and replied with one word. Hate. I instinctively avoided his gaze, pretending not to recognize him. However, he cornered me by the car after the party and said, his eyes red and voice trembling, "Don't treat me this way." Later, I peeked through a partially closed door and saw Shinhuijing sitting in the main seat, his expression stern. His friend whispered, "What about your feelings for Wenyu now?" I held my breath, trying to hide. Shinhuijing's hand tightened around his glass, his eyelids covering all emotions, his tone eerily calm. Hate. My throat felt choked, my heart seemed empty, and I slid down the wall, weak. I knew he would hate me from the day I left him at the airport. That year, Shinhuijing's father passed away, and his half-brother took advantage of the situation to seize power. Faced with relentless attacks, Shinhuijing's newly inherited family business was slowly devoured by his half-brother, forcing him to relinquish control. The family assets were frozen, and the will stipulated he must leave the country. I promised to accompany him abroad, vowing to provide a peaceful future and never leave him. But on departure day, I broke my promise and fled alone. Later, I tried to hide from his world, but fate pulled us back together. At the end of the party, I was pretending to play with my phone when a waiter asked if I needed help. When I looked up, my presence was exposed. Shinhuijing's gaze fell on me, but he quickly looked away. The party seats were all taken, so I had to sit next to him. The atmosphere was tense, and he didn't speak to me. Until someone joked about his nephew being chubby, Shinhuijing smiled and said, "Yes, the doctor says he needs to watch his weight." Everyone admired the photos on his phone. When the photos reached me, he handed the phone back, a restrained smile on his face. I lowered my head, pretending to focus on my food. Suddenly, my phone rang, flashing a "Dear" emoticon caller ID. Shinhuijing's calm demeanor turned icy, his eyes fixed on me. After the call ended, I hastily bid farewell to a colleague and left. Outside, I heard chair legs scraping behind me but didn't dare look back. It wasn't until we drove away that I felt a bit relieved, watching Shinhuijing recede in the rearview mirror. My friend when he asked anxiously,
"What happened? Did you see Shinhuijing? Did he find you? Did you explain?"
I thought about the truth. The truth was that I received a threatening text at the airport. "If you leave with Shinhuijing, I'll kill Wenyu. Wenyu is my foster sister, but her biological parents raised me as well. We were switched as children by human traffickers. She risked her life to save me, allowing me to return to my biological parents. However, she lost everything because of me. I always remembered her kindness and refused to let her leave when my parents suggested it. Those years made us closest to each other. So, the text message made me afraid to put her in danger. I abandoned Shinhuijing and broke my promise. But I didn't expect him to cut ties completely, changing all his contact information and severing my chances of reaching him. The next morning, when he found out that Shinhuijing was still unmarried,
"Little treasure,
was his nephew, close to him.
why haven't you explained?"
When he urged. I knew she was worried, but I hesitated. Just as I pondered, fate brought us face to face again. One day, my company assigned me to deliver documents to Shinhuijing's office. Despite my reluctance, I eventually had to take on the task. As I entered his office, his familiar voice pierced through the air. I nervously handed him the documents and tried to leave, but he stopped me. He asked why I pretended not to know him, his eyes laced with sarcasm. I trembled inside but didn't respond. When he asked why I left him years ago, his phone interrupted us. That night, I developed a high fever from stress, dreaming of his cold expression accusing me of betrayal. After recovering, I tried to quit the project but was denied. At the company, I received bad news. The colleague I was supposed to go on a business trip with was recovering from surgery. The others were busy, leaving only me to fill in. Worse still, I discovered at the last minute that my travel partner was Shin Huijing. I stood at the car door, unsure what to do. Shin Huijing gestured for me to get in, his tone like speaking to a petulant child. I hesitated, seeing the files stacked on the back seat, but had no choice but to sit in the front. To avoid conversation, I pretended to text. Shin Huijing occasionally glanced at me, his words unspoken. However, I started feeling carsick. As the nausea worsened, Shin Huijing noticed and said, "Endure it a bit, I'll find a place to stop." The car stopped, and I rushed out to vomit. Footsteps approached, and he handed me a tissue and water. "Wipe yourself clean." I thanked him and turned away, still feeling uneasy, urging him to get back in the car. The atmosphere remained tense. Shin Huijing asked if it was because of someone, but I feigned ignorance. His face turned cold, and the car's tension increased. I texted when he, explaining it was just car sickness. Shin Huijing snorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're really gentle." I ignored him, continuing to talk to when he as if no one else was there. Fearing car sickness again and not daring to look at him, I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. When I woke up, we were at the hotel. "I'm here." I texted when he. Shin Huijing got out without a glance. After a few steps, he returned to take my luggage without a word. Inside the hotel, I discovered my luggage was still with him. As I prepared to retrieve it, there was a knock at the door. Wet and disheveled, Shin Huijing stood outside, explaining that his room's fire sprinkler system had broken. Seeing the mess in his room, I suggested he change in mine while I arranged a new room. After checking with the front desk, I was told all rooms were booked. I returned to the room, and in my haste, forgot to knock. The sight of Shin Huijing fastening his shirt buttons left me speechless. "Sorry." I turned away. After he finished dressing, I suggested he stay in my room since there were no others available. As he fastened the last button, his gaze paused slightly. "You're so eager to avoid suspicion?" he asked. I explained patiently. "It's not about avoidance, I just thought it might be misunderstood by your wife." Hearing the word wife, his expression turned cold. "You're afraid she'll misunderstand, but what about him? Why did you act irresponsibly towards me back then?" Before I could respond, he grabbed the back of my head and kissed me fiercely, without warning. I stumbled backward, pushing him away. "Shin Huijing, you're married." His gaze was like a knife, cold and sharp. "Married? You fabricated that story to justify your boyfriend?" He sneered, his voice husky. "My wife left me. Who did I marry?" I was stunned, speechless. As I recovered, I grabbed his sleeve. "Wait, what wife? Explain clearly." He pulled away, turning to leave. "Don't bother me, I'll go sleep on the streets." "Shin Huijing." I called after him, trying to clarify, but he vanished into the hallway. The rain started, and I searched around the hotel for him without luck. Finally, my phone rang. It was him. I urged him to return, promising to tell him everything. On the other end, an unfamiliar voice responded with an address. When I found him, he was leaning against a bar wall, exhausted and with a hint of water on his fingers. I gently pulled his hand. "Shin Huijing?" He lifted his head, his eyes a bit dazed. The next moment, he pulled me tightly into his arms and said softly but firmly, Don't treat me like this anymore." Back at the hotel, Shin Huijing mumbled while holding me. "Are you going to leave me for him? Do you want to marry him? I'm so worthless, don't leave me." I stopped, covering his mouth. "Shut up, let's talk later in the room." But he leaned against the door and whispered, "Little treasure is a cat." "A cat?" I was confused for a moment. Shin Huijing leaned closer. "You once said you wanted to have a cat after leaving the country." This was a promise he remembered, a shared memory. For the first time, I realized he had never let go of me. In that moment, he kissed me deeply, with a mix of longing and silent pain. As we lay on the bed, I vaguely heard him whisper, "It's okay, let him come and kill me." That night, Shinhuijing expended all his energy, not caring about exhaustion or time, pouring out all his emotions. When dawn broke, I cried, biting his shoulder. He reluctantly stopped. When I woke up in the afternoon, he was gone. My anxiety surged as I looked everywhere for him, even checking behind the curtains. Finally, I found him in the bathroom, holding his phone while trying to sneak a peek at mine. His expression was serious.
Shinhuijing!
I exclaimed. "What are you doing with my phone?" Hearing me, his hand jerked, nearly dropping the phone into the tub. He quickly recovered, trying to cover his tracks. I took my phone back and checked. Nothing was amiss. I rapped on the tub edge, puzzled.
What did you think you were doing?
Shinhuijing looked around nervously, his eyes darting everywhere. He muttered, "Nothing." He continued avoiding eye contact, like a child caught doing something wrong. Throughout the day, I observed Shinhuijing's suspicious behavior. He was always holding my hand, yet seemed up to something. After dinner, walking outside, I couldn't help but ask,
Shinhuijing, what are you doing?
Startled, he quickly hid his phone. "Nothing." I raised an eyebrow but didn't confront him. Later, I texted when asking about men secretly using their phones. When he replied with a screenshot of her conversation with Shinhuijing, who claimed to be my boyfriend and offered money for her to help him break up with me. Reading this, I couldn't help but laugh at Shinhuijing's misadventures. After finishing dinner, I finally spoke up. "Shinhuijing, it wasn't my intention to leave you back then." He paused, looking at me with a mix of emotions. I revealed the truth. Shinyi threatened to kill if I left with Shinhuijing. Shinhuijing listened silently before gripping my hand. "I've guessed somewhat." "You guessed?" I was surprised. He sighed. "I left the country in a huff, lost my phone and wallet, and realized I couldn't stay passive. Rather than returning to make you suffer with me, it was better to build strength and take down Shinyi." I felt a pang of heartache, squeezing his hand. "But why say you hate me?" His ears reddened, he coughed lightly. "On purpose, to see if you'd comfort me, and you said hate lasts longer than love." I laughed. "You knew I was eavesdropping?" Shinhuijing tightened his grip, looking up at me with a hint of mischief. "I thought I hinted enough. Who knew you'd imagine me married with kids and avoid me?" I was embarrassed, poking him lightly. "Shinhuijing." He winced, holding my hand to stop me from teasing him. As we approached the elevator, he suddenly asked, "Who is the person with the deer emoticon?" "One he." Shinhuijing was overjoyed, laughing like a child. "So it was when you weren't dating after all." I tried to push away Shinhuijing's hands, which were wrapped around my waist. "Let go, I need to pack my luggage." His body stiffened, and his tone was cautious. "What's with packing your bags?" I explained honestly. When he said she's scared alone. Initially, I had planned to spend more time with Shinhuijing, but now. He relaxed and then became irritable, tightening his grip. "She says she's scared, and you immediately rush back to keep her company? When I was mugged abroad, I was scared too. Why didn't you stay with me?" I teased him with a smile. "Try being unreasonable again." Shinhuijing pouted and let me go. Half an hour later, I received a message from Wenhee. She said she wasn't scared anymore and told me to have fun with Shinhuijing. When I asked why, she sent a screenshot of a transfer record with the text, "He gave too much." I humorously replied with an emoticon, carrot. Before we could enjoy ourselves, Shinyi suddenly posted a long article claiming Shinhuijing was the illegitimate child, switched at birth over 20 years ago. He stated that he initially didn't mind but wanted Shinhuijing to stay out of Shin family affairs after going abroad. However, Shinhuijing returned with high profile and was undermining Shin Corporation. After seeing the message, Shin Huijing and I immediately flew back home. He suggested doing a paternity test with his mother. Shin Yi demanded he join the test as well, accompanied by many people for a live broadcast. Shin Huijing's mother looked at Shin Yi calmly and grasped Shin Huijing's hand. "There's no need, Shin Huijing is my son." Shin Yi laughed, denying it. "Impossible, your husband told me before he died that he swapped us so I could inherit the Shin family." Shin Huijing's mother revealed a faint smile. "I knew from the day he switched the children. I quietly swapped them back and waited to see what he would do. Your father and his mother were heartless to do such a thing." Shin Ye's face changed dramatically. He had always been unloved by his parents and was left with a broken rib by his father when he showed interest in finance. After his father's death, he quickly sought to claim his place and clear his name as an illegitimate child. The result was that Shin Yi ended up sitting on the floor. Shin Huijing's mother looked down at him. It seems heaven has a way of balancing things, letting the one named Shin die in the hands of his own beloved son. Shin Yi tried to speak but couldn't. Shin Huijing relaxed, noticing his change. When Shin Yi begged for a paternity test, Shin Huijing agreed. The results were as expected. Shin Yi reacted by crying and laughing. "He lied to me." After this, Shin Huijing focused on restructuring the company. When he was away, I would invite Wen He over to chat. When he often stayed too long, and Shin Huijing would return without the time to pay attention to her. Eventually, he grew tired of this and drove her away. Before I took a shower, Shin Huijing wrapped his arms around me. "If when he and I fell into the water, who would you save?" I remained silent for a few minutes, choosing not to answer. Since I wouldn't respond, Shin Huijing wouldn't let go. Eventually, I placated him, saying I would definitely save him first. Shin Huijing was pleased and recorded this conversation, sending it to Wen He. Later, when he came over, upset. I felt caught between the two. Once Shin Huijing stopped gloating and went into the bathroom, I quickly texted Wen He. I lied to him, of course, I'd save you first since you can't swim. Don't be angry, let's go see handsome guys tomorrow. Before Wen He could respond, Shin Huijing appeared behind me with a hint of a smile. "You lied to me?" I stiffened and forced a smile. "How could I lie to you?" Shin Huijing snorted, not speaking, and turned his back, exuding an aura of being offended. I poked his shoulder. "Shin Huijing?" He avoided my touch. I pulled his fingers. "Don't be angry, I didn't lie to you." Shin Huijing huffed. "You often lie to me." Since he wasn't yielding, I leaned on his shoulder and blew gently into his ear. "Don't be angry." Shin Huijing tensed, still not responding. I pouted, deciding to rest and try again later. But before I could straighten up, Shin Huijing pulled me into his arms. He asked me to comfort him, but I had already tried. He said, "Comfort me, and I won't be angry." I agreed again, "Don't be angry, okay?" Shin Huijing shook his head. "No good." He picked me up and tossed me onto the bed. "This method won't work, let's try another."